Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of The Best You, a coaching podcast. It's Gary here again, and I'd like to start by thanking you very much for joining me. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is not your first time, thank you very much for joining me again. I hope you're all doing very well and investing in whatever work you've committed to getting closer to being the best you. So following on from previous episodes, in this show we're going to follow through the content provided in blog number 4, Core Values. Do You Know Yours, where I delved a wee bit further into what core values are, why they're important to know and understand, how you find out what yours are, and I touched on a wee bit also what you could do once you know your core values to kind of push yourself on a wee bit. What you can expect in this episode, in terms of a quick overview of what I've been up to, essentially what I've been learning since the last pod. That's a bit of a regular feature, or it will be a regular feature on the pods. And as I'd mentioned before, I suspect some episodes there won't be a whole lot of share-worthy information, and others there might be lots of share-worthy information. And then I want to caveat that by saying this doesn't mean that I haven't been learning, because of course we're all learning and growing every single day, but I don't want to bore you with some of the minutiae on day-to-day learnings that might not have much resonance with you, and I would much rather like to concentrate on the more poignant learning collateral as we move forward together. Anyway, we'll see what it looks like as we move forward together. Like last time, I'll be able to provide a quick book review, and the book for this episode is again from my archive. And for those who listen to episode 2, you'll know that this is just a fancy way of me saying I've already read this book and I've already captured my thoughts and my notes on this book, so I don't have to do a whole hell of a lot of anything for this particular segment. And the book for this time is the brilliant book called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, I think it is. And what inspired me to read this was actually a bit of a funny story. I went to see someone in the office one day, and she had a box at her desk with a bunch of these books in it, and I asked her what they were, and she said they were part of some form of leadership development course or program or whatnot. I'm not 100% sure what it was, so I cheekily asked if I could snag a copy, and she very graciously said yes. So prior to that, I honestly hadn't heard anything about the book, what it was about, how it was written, who wrote it, and quite frankly, if the book was any good or not. So now I don't want to give you the wrong impression that I'll just take anything as long as it's free. Maybe that was a trait of little Gary, a younger version of myself, but I try to live a less cluttered life as I mature, and I'm sure most of my nearest and dearest will say that they haven't actually seen any signs of maturation from me, but that's another story for another day. But on this particular occasion, I did pick up a copy and scan through the table of contents and the content itself, and it did look quite intriguing and honestly easy to read, which are two strong traits that are likely to pique my interest, just to be very clear. So in terms of timing, I don't know exactly the date that I was given the copy, but it was quite some time before the pandemic, actually, so before March 2020, and I brought it home and did what I do with a lot of books, sat it on my bookshelf or my nightstand next to my bed or on my table in the living room for probably 2 to 3 years. It's kind of difficult to tell as I move things from place to place in the interest of, I don't know what it is actually, but maybe ensuring that I don't forget about it and to make myself feel like I'm actually making progress, or some other bizarro reason. But I hadn't read it to that point. But as I'd mentioned in episode 2, I have been a wee bit delinquent on some of what I would consider to be the more commonly known classic books, and I am currently trying to carve out as much time as I can to get through the absolute learnings that have been out there for some time, that I know tens or hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of people have already learned. So I know that I'm playing catch up to most, but there are likely some who haven't read them. So in the spirit behind the book review is to either edutain you for the first time if you haven't read the book, or to refresh your memory as to the key messages from the author and my interpretation on what resonated with me from the content from the book. I'd mentioned that it did look easy to read, and it certainly was. It was also light. It had a very fun feel to the messaging that includes practical examples and where the content would apply to anyone who has a responsibility for any type of coaching style conversation. So, like the last time, it's not going to be an in-depth critique of all things good or otherwise in the book. I am absolutely 100% no literary critic at all. I'll simply review some of the highlights that struck a bit of a chord with me and how I will or I'm already using them as well. So let's start with the key theme of the book. The key overarching takeaway for me was the 7 questions, the 7 coaching questions that are used in some form of order to help you work through a coaching style conversation with another individual or a team or something like that. And the questions are now, and as I say, for now, imagine these in a chronological flow from the beginning of the conversation through the body of the conversation to the end of the conversation. So I'll start with the 7 questions. The first question is what he calls the kickstart question, and that question is, what's on your mind? The second one is the awe question, and that's AWE. And this is the one that he concentrates most on. If you ever search any podcast that he's been on, or maybe, I don't know if he's done any TED Talks, maybe he has, and he will say, the awe question is AWE, and it's and what else, and he really does concentrate on that one to draw more information out of the person who's being coached. So the third question is the focus question. What's the real challenge here for you? Number 4, the foundation question. What do you want? Number 5, the lazy question. How can I help? Or a more direct version of that he states in the book is, what do you want from me? So a wee bit more focus on the specifics there. Number 6 is the strategic question. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? It's not just an endless bucket of things that you can provide to people. And number 7 is the learning question. What was most useful for you? And that can be a catch-all question in terms of what was most useful for you in terms of the conversation that you've just had, or the learnings that you've gained from the conversation, or any other periphery parts of the conversation that's just taken place as well. So 7 questions: the kickstart question, the awe question, the focus question, the foundation question, the lazy question, the strategic question, and the learning question. So if you followed that along, I mentioned that a wee bit earlier, that you'll see a natural opening to the conversation, some real quality questions in the middle to move the client or the coachee forward, and a logical wrap up or closing question to the conversation. Now here's a wee tidbit for you. As a person in a coaching role, and this is you I'm talking about, by the way, I think it's unlikely that you're going to telegraph the questions by saying to someone, for example, now I'm going to ask you the awe question, or now should we move to the lazy question. I think your role as a coach is to have structure to your questioning, including some form of chronology, in terms of opening, the body and the closing, but also enough flexibility in your repertoire to adjust based on the information being shared by the client at any given point in time. So that, in my opinion, separates the average to the good coaches and the good to the great coaches, I believe. So you might also remember from episode 2 that some key questions suggested to consider for preparing for approaching a crucial conversation were, what do I really want for myself? What do I really want for others? What do I really want for the relationship? And how would I behave if I really wanted those results? So I did consider these questions and how they may fit in with the 7 questions that Bungay Stenier poses. And I think the short answer is that perhaps they don't really, marry in to the 7 questions, unless every coach and client were to ask these questions of themselves before every session. This would then suggest that every coaching conversation is classified as a crucial conversation. And remember, the main criteria for the crucial conversation was that they would involve opposing opinions, strong emotions, and high stakes. So in the purest of intentions for coaches, our opinions as a coach, in my opinion as a coach, should not be a factor in trying to help my clients move forward. This is absolute. And if a coach were to find that their opinions were a contributory factor in how they are coaching their client, positive or negative, then they are under a professional ethical responsibility to acknowledge this with the client and come up with a shared vision of how to move forward, which could include a reset of the conversation. It could include, avoiding that particular topic, or potentially ending the relationship if you can't get beyond that. It depends, and it will be situational, of course. Can strong emotions and high stakes be part of a coaching relationship? I think they can, but again, more from a client perspective. The coach must remain open, must remain neutral, must be listening intently at all times, and be curious to the core for the coaching relationship to bear the fruits that the client wants, needs, and deserves. So, in summary, these questions between both books, I reckon there's a part for them to play together, but there doesn't appear to be an absolute direct correlation or natural partnership between the questions as well. So just a bit of a tidbit on that. So accompanying the 7 key questions in the book were some other real genuine nuggets of information that I found really helpful in framing some of the key concepts shared, such as distinguishing the different tracks or facets of coaching into 2 distinct buckets. One is coaching for performance and the other is coaching for development. Coaching for performance is essentially problem solving, fixing a situation, firefighting, dealing with something emergent and possibly temporary. Coaching for development is shifting the focus to the person to help instill future approaches and behaviours that will proactively address situations so that performance issues become less prevalent in the future. Both have a place. There is not one that's better than the other, but just having those discernible buckets between both, it gives the coach and the client the opportunity to make sure that the right approach is going to address the situations that are intended to be addressed for that particular part of the relationship. He also discussed 5 essential components to building new habits. Now remember, this book is called The Coaching Habit. So instilling a habit in yourself to be able to coach effectively, coach consistently, and coach properly as well. And those 5 essential components to building the habits were: you would need a reason, to build the habit, that is, of course. You would need a trigger, you would need a micro habit, you would need effective practice, and you would need a plan. So without all of these, habit formulation will at best be difficult, and at worst be haphazard, difficult, frustrating, and ultimately unsuccessful, I would say. And throughout the book, as he introduces key concepts and how to build into the new habit, the formula he has, which I think is very effective, is you identify the trigger, which is number 2 from the essential components, you'll remember, and say to yourself, or even write it down, and there is space in the book for you to do this as well if you like to write in your books, and say, when you've identified the trigger, say, when this happens, you then identify the old habit. Instead of, you then define a work into the new behaviour by saying, I will. So when this happens, instead of, I will. And using this corrective, if I can use that term, corrective, using this corrective phraseology will help with creating a new lens and most likely access to data that you weren't using before, from which to build a more positive path going forward. So just remember that when you come across something that has triggered you, when this happens, instead of reacting a way that I used to react before, I will react in a new way that I would like, that will provide a more positive outcome, something like that. So that's a key foundational component part of the book as well. He also goes on to talk about the 3 Ps of framing things for clients when you're in a coaching conversation, and that is framing it into projects, framing it into people, or patterns, and working these into the context setting for the client helps work within a certain criteria or buckets, and thus helps frame the issues, as I said, frame the questions that you're going to ask, and frame the desired end state behaviours that the client would like to get to as you go forward as well. So people, projects, and patterns. I don't know that there's any specific chronological flow to these, so just knowing what those are would be a benefit for a coaching conversation as well. And there is a discussion about Manfred Max Neef's 9 universal needs for humans. I'll just list them out right now. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. They are affection, creation, recreation, freedom, identity, understanding, participation, protection, and subsistence. Oh, that was a tough one to get out. And I didn't delve too much into that in the book, or even in any further study, other than just capturing it and appreciating that, essentially there are different philosophies out there on what human wants, needs, desires, and resultant behaviours are, and this is one that he had shared in the book. And I really like this next part where he explains Stephen Caron's drama triangle. And the drama triangle, the three facets of the triangle are the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. And he's talking about people's behaviour here, and the victim he describes as whiny, and that's what I mean about the kind of casual comedy language. And the whiny person would ask, why does this always happen to me? Or questions kind of like that, some sort of victim mentality questions. The persecutor is more aggressive, and they think everyone else, not themselves, I'm sure, is a fool or some sort of idiot. And the kind of main prevalent question for that would be, what's the point? And then the third one is the rescuer. And the rescuer is more smothering, more micromanaging, and then kind of wondering why anyone doesn't want their help. And I thought that I really liked this part of it, because it really resonates a lot with the positive intelligence work that I'm doing, and the saboteurs and the sage to combat the saboteurs and stuff. So the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer are key parts of that. And if you're interested in that, you can read a wee bit more about that in the book. And he also discussed strategy, and strategy was one of the parts of developing a habit. And he talked about how overused the term and maybe confused people are about the term of strategy, and that leads to some misunderstanding. And he suggested 5 strategic questions, being, if you're building a strategy, of course, number 1, what is our winning aspiration? 2, where will we play? 3, how will we win? 4, what capabilities must be in place? And 5, what management systems are required? So 5 strategic questions as well, but a lot more dialogue in there just about the value of strategy, how underperformed it is, and as I said there earlier, just how misunderstood it is as well. And I really love this part when he explained how people typically learn. And he says that people learn not by being told, and not even by doing. They learn only when they've had a chance to recall and reflect on what happened, which then helps them create new neural pathways and absorb information differently, and use that reflection point to be able to develop a different way of reacting or acting as you go forward as well. So that's a wee bit different to some text I've read before, where people don't learn by being told, they learn by doing. He takes it a step further, doing, yes, and then the chance to recall and reflect. So really, really like that part. But in wrapping up the content for the book, he did discuss information retrieval, and that's just a fancy way of saying not forgetting, from a book called Make It Stick, I believe, which is the science of successful learning. And what he explains there is that our brains are wired to start forgetting things almost immediately after we experience them. And that makes a lot of sense, because I don't have a great memory at all. And I have to do a whole bunch of things to ensure that I don't forget things, which is like writing things down or kind of consistently repeating things to myself. And our job as a coach is to interrupt the process of forgetting, both ourselves to be able to remind the client what happened in previous sessions, and also for the client not to forget some of the learnings and breakthroughs that we've had along the way. And one of the ways he suggests that we do that is to ask the question in the early stages of the following coaching session: what have you learned since we last met? To train the brain to remember not to forget, and do whatever works for you to ensure that the process of forgetting things is eliminated completely, or at least in some way slowed down. But really, really, really fascinating, I thought, on that information retrieval and the brain's propensity to try to forget things as quickly as possible. I wonder why that is. Maybe that's for future research and maybe a future topic on the pod as well. And the final part of this great book that I wanted to mention was a question that he posed about stupid questions, and it was originally asked by Scott Adams. And if you know Scott Adams, he's the person behind the Dilbert cartoons fame. And the question there, and I laugh because, stupid questions is a topic that a lot of people will say if they're speaking in front of people or they're having, a conversation of some description with people. And what Scott Adams says is, if there are no stupid questions, then what kind of questions do stupid people ask? Do they get smart just in time to ask questions? And I absolutely love this. I love the humour is intertwined with a very valid point, quite honestly, And as an educator, I educate at a local university. I think I mentioned that in my intro in pod number 1. I'll say in class, just to put people at ease, by the way, there are no such things as stupid questions in my classroom. And then my act, which is, teaching is a little bit of an act, is that the very first question that someone asks after I say that, I then fake exasperation, and then say something like, wow, obviously I was only kidding about there being no stupid questions. That was a humdinger, or something similar like that. And the intent of that is not to humiliate anyone or trifle with anyone's emotions, of course, but it's more to put the class at ease and set the tone that we're going to approach things just a wee bit lighter and have some fun than maybe they've experienced in the classroom before. Not a style that's for everyone, of course, but that's my particular jam, and it's why I use the word edutainment now and again as well. So there you have it, my friends, the book report for Michael Bungay Stanier's The Coaching Habit. If you're in a position where you are having coaching conversations on a regular basis and you haven't snagged yourself a copy of the book, I would really encourage you to do so, as it's full of way more content, tips, tricks and lessons on how to do this more efficiently, more effectively and more consistently than what I've shared with you today. It really is a good read, and I'm glad I got to share some of my observations with you on it today. I hope that was valuable. So, what have I been up to since we last chatted? That's a great question. Apart from writing book reports, I did do a wee bit more work on the website, garygillen.com. What you'll see now there, if you go and visit it, you'll see some testimonials up there now from some key clients who were very kind to provide some positive words about the journey that we've been on together. And I also posted blog number 4 on values, which I'll talk about a wee bit here as we get through the content. I'm still working through the curriculum on my positive intelligence operating system work, and I'm happy to share that I'm in a bit more of a better groove with the materials and cadence this past wee while, and as I get a bit of rhythm going in my life. It's all about ebbs and flows and doing what you can when you can, and not beating yourself up when you can't get to doing everything that you want to do. But just a wee reminder, if you're not familiar with the positive intelligence work, a core part of the framework is educating participants on their psychological makeup, which is made up of sage and saboteurs. I talked about that a wee bit earlier there in the book report, and I'm thoroughly enjoying learning more about the aspects of both and how I can apply them to myself, quite frankly, and in a coaching context as well. I have a few clients recently who have completed the free saboteur assessment to give themselves a bit of a sneak peek into their own saboteur makeup, and this has led to some very interesting conversations, I can tell you. And what that is fascinating for me is to give people an insight that maybe they didn't have before, and an opportunity to take the conversations in a slightly different direction. If someone says, I want to reduce my judge, I want to reduce my hyper achiever or my restless saboteur, I want to increase the various parts of the sage elements as well. So yeah, I'll continue to share a bit more about that as the learnings continue. And in terms of books on the go, the main one that I'm concentrating for right now, or my time on right now, is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And the reason is that I've just recently found it again, and I'm almost through it. And so I might have a book report on that for next time, but maybe not. It depends on how things pan out over the next wee while. But I'm getting through it, and it's another very, very enjoyable read, and hopefully I'll get a chance to share on that as we go forward. So on to embellishing the content of blog number 4, Core Values. Do you know yours? I wanted to start with a wee bit of background on this one. Initially, I tried to have a solid and repeatable framework for all of the blogs, just to frame my thoughts, have a bit of consistency and make it flow the way that I wanted to. And the initial headings that I typically use, you didn't really fit for the subject matter. So if you were paying super close attention to the blogs, you will have noticed that there was a slight deviation from the norm, and if you could call out two of the previous three blogs the norm, I guess, since there's only been four. But I'm sure, I hope that it didn't take away from your educational or viewing pleasure of the messaging that I was trying to convey. But I just wanted to acknowledge that I did deviate away from some of the previous headings specifically, and because it just flowed better the way that it ended up. So I started by saying that people act as they do for a reason, and sometimes they know why that is, and sometimes they don't know why that is. And I've long been, intently curious as to why this has been the case. So spent some time recently considering how, where, and when core values would play a role in a person's overall psychological structure. Now, this possibly could have been a topic to explore prior to the previous Pendulum Reactions blog that I'd put together, but there's enough connectivity and circularity, I'm pretty sure circularity is not a word, by the way, to both topics to comfortably tackle this one now. And the main thing was to get the values out in the open and on the table for discussion as early in our journey together, so that we can use it as a reference point going forward in the future. I did mention on the blog that again, I could have been a bit more organised, but life doesn't always work out like that. The stuff is relevant. The stuff is not a chronological order, I guess, is probably the best way just to kind of wrap that part up. So on the background part, following on from blogs number two and three, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some possible reasons for why the pendulum reactions happen for people. Most people I interact with act as they do for a reason. In fact, I think it's probably fair to say that everyone on this planet acts as they do for a reason, and I'm making it a major component in my life goals to try and decipher why, so that I can adjust my reaction to behaviour so as not to exacerbate any negativity in the moment, and also to see if there are opportunities to help people move from a negative conflict state, to something that's a bit more on the positive or peaceful side. And that's my aim, as I say, personally and professionally in my coaching practice. This is one of the key reasons for embarking on this whole entire coaching journey in the first place, was to help people do something that works for them, that would get them to a more positive state of being. So I started to ask myself, when I'm working with clients or people in general, whether it be, again, professionally or personally, what are some of the potential foundational circumstances that could cause a negative reaction, or cause a pendulum reaction, to use the phrase from the last pod? And through my coaching training, one area I became very curious to discover more about was people's values. And I started with the basics, the basic questions. And these are questions that I was asking myself, to be really clear on that. What are values? Who has them? How do I find out mine? How do you find out yours? Why do they matter? In fact, do they even matter? Why are they important? Where do they show up? What do they do? And will they change over time? And what do I need to do to evaluate them periodically as we go forward? And what I'll do is I'll give you a wee bit of my interpretation of these questions at the end of this pod, if I remember. If I don't, I'll maybe do it next time. But for the purposes of the following materials, my main angle that I'm going to share with you now was more so related to personal values, but I'm fairly sure the content could also be applied through like a more cultural or organisational or societal lens as well. So before we go any further, let's work through the definition of values. I wrote in the blog, a person's values are their principles or standards of behaviour, their judgment of what is and is not important in life, in their life. And then I went on to further dissect that statement via the three following keywords that bounced out for me from that definition, which was principles, which is our foundational baseline of conduct or self-management; standards, our morals, ethics, habits and behaviours; and important or importance, how much something truly matters to us. And I think it's important to establish your own principles, standards and level of importance to those, to be able to help guide your own thoughts, feelings and actions. If you have little or no discernible knowledge of your core values, the less foundational structure and overall understanding and control you'll have in your behaviour, and the more susceptible I think you'll be to inconsistencies, erratic tendencies, and general confusion as to why you're acting the way that you're acting. And I wanted to tell you about a key principle that I learned during my IPEC training, and this was very early on, I think in module 1 of 3 modules that we did. And what I captured in my notes at the time was, if you are happy, content, and generally, loving life, your values are being honoured. If the opposite emotions are in play, your values are being compromised. So if things are going well, your values are being honoured. Things not going so well, they're being compromised. It really does seem very, very simple to say it and probably to hear it, doesn't it? However, if you sit down and think about how difficult it is to decipher why you're content or the opposite, at the opposite side of the spectrum, I firmly believe, if you don't have a genuine understanding of your core values, it's going to be more difficult to understand what that looks like. I then describe a framework that helps you understand the benefits of truly identifying and understanding your values. And these benefits would be creating boundaries for yourself, and these are benefits of your values, of course. Creating boundaries for yourself and others via demonstrable behaviours and clearer communications, making clear, focused and personally ethical decisions, setting priorities by clearly identifying or clarifying what is and is not important to you, which will help you prioritise your goals and your actions accordingly. Growth and development, true understanding of your core values or your moral compass will ensure that you spend only time on the things that really truly matter to you, leading hopefully to life growth and ongoing development for yourself and others within your circle, I'm sure. And then building strong and or strengthening existing relationships, so building strong new relationships or strengthening existing relationships, which will help you establish who in your life and what type and style of influence they will have on you and you on them, of course. Fostering general overall positivity, which comes from an inherent knowledge of self, which leads to then a more confident persona. And when you and others know where you stand with each other, positivity just naturally grows from there. And then the last one was know that you are living your best you. See what I did there? The Best You podcast then has a little bit of a plug in there for ensuring that you are living the best you. Yes, indeed. So yeah, just a quick recap: creating boundaries, helping you make decisions, setting priorities, growth and development, building strong and or strengthening existing relationships, fostering overall general positivity, and knowing that you are living the best you, I should say. All right, so I hope I've sold you on the importance of benefits from knowledge of your core values. If you haven't invested in any values work to date, and that's absolutely fine if you haven't, or even if you have invested in work previously, I'm going to give you an option of how I discovered my values, or how you can reaffirm your own values or refresh your memory in terms of the work that you did previously. So my belief is that a part of our core being, you can't have too many, and I think 3 to 5 core values that are absolute. And when I say absolute, what I mean by that is that they typically won't change regardless of where our life journey takes us. They are absolutely foundational values, core foundational values, so to speak. So however, at any given point in our life journey, we can have secondary values, and these could be transient or specific to a particular stage you're at in your life, or a life event, or a career choice, or relationship status, or health situation, or just general human circumstances, I guess. And now here's a key point: the fact that a value is considered as secondary, and that's just a word that I used. It's maybe not even the best word to use, but not a primary value, not a core value, something like that. It doesn't mean that it's any less important than the core values, nor would or should it be given any less attention or be taken any less seriously. To me, a secondary value simply means it can be somewhat transient and could potentially change over time, up to and including possibly disappearing altogether. So just a bit of a caveat on that. So back to the 3 to 5 core values. The reason it's important is that your life all day, every day, it is important to your life. I can't imagine that if you had any more than 3 or 5 that you would be able to remember say, for example, 10 values, let alone keeping them at the forefront. So if you have any more than the kind of 3 to 5 that I suggest, it could be overwhelming, is really what I'm saying here. So some people have better memories than others, of course, but if you keep the 3 to 5 at the forefront and let them align with everything that you do, align with yourself, then I think you might be able to remember them better, live to them better, and understand how they're serving you, and then go forward as well. So I learned also the following technique during my IPEC training that has worked well for myself personally, and also for some clients as well. And it's just you essentially create a table with 3 columns. The left-hand column is the value, the right-hand column is the action, or the value rating. Sorry, the left-hand column is the value. Let me get this straight. Left-hand column is the value, in the middle is the value rating, and then on the right-hand side is the action rating. In the value column, you would write down as many words as you can think of for values, and it's important that you take the lead on this part of the exercise, as the words, or maybe it's a phrase, must be meaningful to you, and it doesn't matter where they rank or in terms of importance. Why is it at this particular point? The action rating part will help you transpire into what's maybe of lesser or greater importance to you. And in there, I did make some suggestions in the blog of what some values potentially could be: honesty, humour, loyalty, privacy, respect, service, trust, etc. It could be any of them. Other ones could be family, fun, fulfillment, humour, vitality, spirituality, privacy, leadership, joy, whatever it is, whatever you get to make them up. And once you have the list done there, in the value rating column, what you're going to do is basically rank each word or statement that you have in there with a scale. You get to make up the scale. The scale that I use is 1 to 10, 1 being not important at all, and 10 being the most important ever. So you're going to rate the value itself in the middle column in terms of its importance to you, and then on the right hand column, in the action rating column, you're going to use the same rating cadence. Again, 1 to 10 is the one that I use, and then you put in there how often you put that value into action. And what this does is it starts to help you determine whether you're truly serious, if I could use that word, about a value's importance to you. For example, if you have a value rating of 9 but an action rating, like how much you put that value into action, of say 2, that's going to give you data to consider whether truly it is a 9 in terms of importance if you rarely put it into action, and vice versa. If you had something that was low but you did it frequently, then maybe you would start to kind of course correct or adjust the numbers to get yourself to a spot where you can start to whittle things down to something that would be a smaller list. 3 to 5 I think would be best. When I did it, I did 5. My preferred number would probably be 3 for myself personally, but you get to choose that. And then what you essentially do is you go through a series of passes. You rank and analyse your first pass to see where you landed, and then you have a conversation with yourself essentially to know, appreciate, understand whether the ones you thought would be at the top made it to the top. If not, why not? And then, as I say, conduct as many passes as you need to get it down to the 3 to 5. It does take a wee bit of time to get through this exercise, but not as much time as you would think. And believe me, honestly, the awareness and understanding that you'll have of yourself at the end of this exercise will be more than worth the effort. If you go to the blog, you'll see that explained a wee bit differently, or a wee bit better, than I've probably explained on the pod today. And there's a wee example there of what the table could look like. And then once you've completed the exercise to the point where you're comfortable with and you have your core values established, congratulations, this is an achievement in and of itself. And now comes the reinforcement part, and the ongoing reinforcement is going to be different for everyone. For some, writing your core values down will, somewhere readily visible will help. For others, it may be creating voice notes, or that you could reference at some point at any given point in time. It doesn't matter what you do. In fact, actually, I would be really interested to hear from you as to how you successfully reinforce key and important information or key and important items in your life. So please do get in touch. Contact details are on the website for that. But part of the reinforcement will be at some point down the line when you find yourself having an emotional circumstance, positive or negative, that hopefully you'll refer back to and use the foundational reference point of your core values as an indicative marker as to how you're thinking, what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're acting or reacting the way that you are. And this will absolutely provide you with more enlightenment on your own thoughts, on your own beliefs, and will give you a solid foundation from which to build into the person you deserve to be. The best you. See what I did there again? Yeah, you like it. And like the pod number 2, the pendulum reaction subject matter, I think this is something that I'll continue to refer to and come back to over time to test my theories presented there. That's the plan for right now. So anyway, I did say at the beginning, this is a bit of a longer pod today, of course, but I did say that I would go back to the questions of values and maybe try and answer them as a wrap up to this episode. So what are they? I explained what they are. They're your values, the principles, your standards of behaviour, and your judgment of what is or isn't important to you. Who has them? Absolutely every single person. How do you find out yours? Maybe a version of the exercise that I talked you through there just recently. Why do they matter, or do they matter? They matter a great deal. They are your core being, and if you know and understand them and know and understand your actions and reactions as to whether they're being honoured or compromised, that gives you such a step up in terms of living to your emotional moral compass, I think, as well. When are they important? All day, every day. Where do they show up? In every facet of your life, I would suggest. And what do? They help guide you. They help your emotions either be in check or not, and they help you be the person that you are. Hopefully, using them positively, they'll help you be the person that you want to be. Will they change over time? I think the core ones would be have more permanence, I believe, and then the secondary ones, to use the wording that I'd used earlier, but could possibly evolve over time up to and including maybe not being a factor anymore. And do I need to evaluate them periodically? Absolutely yes. In some way, reinforcing them to a way that makes sense for you, so that you become so aware of self, so understanding of what makes you tick, what floats your boat, what really upsets you, and you can live a much better, more aware life, if I could say that as well. Okay. So I hope this episode of The Best You, a coaching podcast, was valuable to you and a valuable use of your time, and that you will continue to join me for more as we move forward. If you found it valuable, please do share it with others as we continue to try to build our community of like-minded folks from around the globe to help each other continue to work towards being the absolute best that we all can be. I do get some analytics from my podcast platform provider, and it's quite cool and exciting to see the download numbers increase week on week. Well, I would be devastated if they got less and less each week, but it's just kind of cool to see what we're building here. The numbers aren't massive, by the way, but they are rising, and that's brilliant to see as we do continue this journey together. Don't forget to take a peek at garygillen.com for more content and more information as you go forward. Please, by all means, subscribe into the portion that you can there, and you'll receive blogs and information and bits and pieces from me. I promise I don't clog up your inbox at all. Until next time, my friends, please do take care of yourself, and all the very best to you in your journey. Cheerio now.